The shift to remote and hybrid work over the past 2 years has accelerated application development on cloud infrastructure. However, securing these new assets has lagged behind. Qualys CloudView, the next generation cloud security posture management, delivers an end-to-end multi-cloud security and compliance solution encompassing the entire application lifecycle from build to runtime. CloudView enables enterprises to assess their cloud security and compliance posture, identify risks and gaps, auto-remediate issues, proactively enforce best practices, and prove compliance and audits rapidly and efficiently. Identify your most vulnerable cloud assets by visiting securityweekly.com/Qualys.
It's time to rethink how we approach cybersecurity because the reality is modern cyber attackers are already past your initial defenses. ExtraHop helps your security team find and eradicate advanced threats before real damage is done. Protect your enterprise and customers with better defense. Learn more about how ExtraHop stops advanced threats at securityweekly.com/ExtraHop. That's extra HOP.
According to the 2022 Data Breach Investigations Report, 82% of breaches involve the human element. Yet most security awareness and training programs focus on compliance requirements, not the risk humans pose to your organization. Living Security is the leader in human risk management. This new approach transforms human risk into proactive defense by quantifying human risk. By understanding your riskiest and most vigilant users and activities, you can engage these segments of your workforce with relevant training, communications, and policies to truly change their behaviors. If your goal is to finally change your workforce's behavior, visit securityweekly.com/living security to learn more today. Welcome back to Business Security Weekly. I am your host, Matt Alderman, joined by Jason Albuquerque and Tyler Robinson. Do you have a specific guest or topic that you want us to cover on one of the shows? Submit your suggestions for guests by visiting securityweekly.com/guests and completing the form. We review suggestions often and will reach out to you once reviewed. Follow us on Twitter for live stream reminders, highlighted clips, memes, and more. You can find us at SecWeekly. All right, gentlemen, articles for the week. There are some interesting risk ones in here. As you know, we just had a risk quantification discussion, so I try to pull in the articles. And they're kind of sprinkled across some of these articles. The first one is this is Cybersecurity Leadership Broken. Now, this is a survey out of, I think it's out of Europe. It's not a US-based one. I think it's out of the UK. And what I highlighted this one section. The report finds that most crucially, chief information security officers are hired, managed, and evaluated as technical experts rather than business leaders, a skills gap that is leaving companies increasingly vulnerable to cyber threats. Now, that may be true overseas. I'm not sure that's as true in the US, but I'd love your take on this one.
Yeah, I mean, I sit back and I say, just over the course of the last 4 years that I've been on Business Security Weekly, I think we've made a ton of progress from a cybersecurity leadership perspective, at least here in the US, right?
Yes.
We've definitely matured. A lot of the conversations that we had 4 years ago are starting to become reality. I mean, honestly, Matt, you know that, right? Mm-hmm. So many of the things that we talked about 4 years ago, we're starting to see in articles as best practices. So I think we're maturing. Is it perfect? Absolutely not. Are we on a good trajectory? I think we are.
Yeah, I tend to agree with you.
Technical people in the leadership roles has definitely been kind of the opposite that I've ever seen. You always are on that management, especially even if you've come up the technical track, you're typically accelerating up the management track and you're managing people, you lose your technical aptitude and you take over that business role. That's why you're able to do it, because you're a good leader and you know business. Exactly. Otherwise, that progression has typically not been seen. And if it is, it's a pretty rare case, I guess. Like you said, overseas, maybe that's a little different.
Yeah. And I think it's just a level of the maturity, right? And I've seen this across the markets because I used to travel around a lot when I was Tenable. I go into Europe multiple times a year and I go into Asia, and there is definitely a different level of maturity across the different regions and different countries. And so I'm not surprised that maybe there's some lagging in other areas because I think the U.S. has always led here as well. But Jason, the conversations I have with CISOs, our CISO advisory board, like they are highly aligned to the business. They are not as technical as the early day CISOs were. I mean, we've made huge strides there, and you are having business conversations with a lot of these CISOs now. It's not just technology anymore.
Exactly. Once you start getting into that leadership role, to Tyler's point, you come to a point where you want to be successful as a leader, and you have to be okay. And I say this to a lot of folks who are upcoming, and from a leadership perspective, you have to be okay with pulling your hands off the keyboard. You have to be. Right?
Yeah.
You have to bring in good technical folks to support you, and now you can lead the organization properly.
Yeah, absolutely. Next article, how to translate cybersecurity terms for CEOs. This ties back into the conversation we just had with James in the previous segment around communication, risk assessment, threat. Like it ties in very well with this. I wanted this article to go a little deeper. I wanted it to double click on this kind of one section around a better way. I mean, he talks about not using FUD and FUD tactics, which I totally agree with. I just wanted this article to go a little deeper in some of these concepts, because I think that's the advice. That's some of the best practices that I think others are looking for in the industry. So I wanted this to go a little deeper.
No, agreed. I mean, there was a lot of emphasis on not using, fear, uncertainty, and doubt. We know about that. We've talked about this many, many times here. Some of the notes that I took on this article is, from the fact of FUD tactics make you as a security team viewed as that office of no. Okay, well, how do we get the business to the outcomes they're looking to achieve then, instead of saying no, right? So some of those best practices that I've used is saying, all right, we're not agreeing on a certain initiative. How can I help you get there? What's the outcome you're looking to achieve? Let's find the most secure strategy to get you to that outcome. And let's start working toward a solution versus that, you want to know what, this is a big risk, I'm not going to let it happen. So it's about being a business enabler and how to get the organization to where they're looking to get to.
How do you do that while still providing impact? Because you do have to quantify the risk to a business, and you do have to demonstrate the impact, especially if your executive team is less mature, especially in the security space. So how do you go about doing some of that?
So Tyler, FUD is a balance, right? There's a balance because there's a level of sense of urgency that you need to bring to the table. And sometimes that sense of urgency is a little bit of fear, a little bit of uncertainty. I guess what we did was we overcompensated way back in the day, and all we used was FUD, right? That's all we did. We didn't bring business solutions to the table. We just brought fear to the table. So I think it's a balance.
The pen testers.
That's it, right? Seriously. And I think it's a balance now. We have to swing that pendulum back to the middle, right? And say, all right, here's the risk, here's the uncertainty. Yes, we should be afraid of some things, but here's the business outcomes we're looking to achieve. Here's how we're going to get there, and here's how we're going to be secure getting there.
Right.
Gotta be
dividing that plan and the why, right?
That's it.
I think that plan and having a combined collaborative risk initiative where you're identifying the problem, identifying and telling and articulating those risks, and then bringing them a solution as part of a business enabler. That's really 100%. Where I think we've changed and adapted to be a lot more mature.
Yes.
And other business unit leaders aren't there to cripple the organization. Do you think they want a cyber attack to happen? No. But they're also looking to achieve their mission as a business unit, right? So we have to be there to enable that. They have a job to do. Their business unit has a job to accomplish. How are we getting them there and ensuring that the organization is protected? That's our mission.
Right. Bring them solutions. I got a quick little story because I think this is really relevant. One of our clients on the living security side, using our risk management model, identified some risk in one of their groups. It was their customer support group. And he knew what the risks were. So he went to the business and said, look, just so you know, here's some risks we see with your team. And the person part of customer success is like, well, wait, why do they have access to the internet? They don't really need access to the internet. They use the intranet. They need access to the CRM. Why don't we just shut off internet to this team? Because it's a productivity issue. Now, if you were a CISO and you walked in there and said, look, I'm shutting off your internet service, you know darn well you're going to get a bunch of pushback. But when you bring the data to a business unit and the business unit says, well, wait a minute, why don't we just do this? Because what we just did as the CISOs, we just handed them information. They looked at the information and made a decision that said, wait a minute, not only is this a security risk, it's a productivity risk. I'm actually okay doing this. Now, that's the kind of discussion you want to be able to enable across the business.
Because, Matt, the department now can proactively build process around that, right? We're giving them the ability to think about it, set themselves up for success, because that business unit leader is going to go, hey, team, on this date, this time, you're no longer going to have internet. This is how we're going to handle our jobs. This is what we're going to do to be successful. They're prepared for that. In the days of old, it was shut the internet down and wait till people scream. Right? Like it's reactive. This is the proactive approach. They can prepare for this change that's going to happen.
Right. Exactly right.
A lot of maturity happening. We're actually being proactive. We're setting ourselves up to enable the business. I mean, we're just getting old. That's what's happening.
Is that what happens when we get old? We get more mature? Is that what you're saying?
We are maturing. I refuse to get old.
Right. So that ties into this next article, Reimagining the Role of the CISO. Now, we've covered a lot of these articles, but this one takes a twist that was a little interesting to me, Jason. I was like, wait a minute, I'm not sure I want to go quite this way. So
I did not like this article at all, by the way. I'm just putting it out there. Article.
Yeah. So, and I think I know why, but let me go there. So one of the things this article talks about is making organizational impacts. And it says, perhaps it's time to reimagine the role of the CISO. Maybe it's better to see the CISO's importance reflected in organizational impact rather than organizational status. I don't disagree with that. Perhaps embedding security in functional units will result in better security. I don't disagree with that either. But then it says, imagine the CISO as part of the IT organization ecosystem. Well, wait. Most CISOs have been over the past how many years? The CISO reported to the CIO. That's where we failed.
Yep, we're going back in the hot tub time machine is what we're doing here.
No.
There's a reason this is a bad idea. We can look at history and tell you why it's bad.
Yes.
I mean, basically the premise was shift the responsibilities of the CISO over to the chief risk officer and then embed all the rest of the functions in IT.
Right.
Been there, done that, failed miserably.
Right. This is what that's why I pulled this article forward, because I'm like, wait a minute, that's completely against all the other articles we've covered here of either the CISO has to own risk or they're going to report into the risk group, right? We're getting the CISO finally out from under the trenches and under the control of the IT teams. And this article is trying to put it all back the way it was.
Yeah. Was this article from the UK, kind of like that last one? I don't know. I'm just asking.
I don't know. Maybe I can't remember. Maybe. I don't know.
No, I'm just, I'm kidding, but on a side note, I'm not. We just talked about 10 minutes ago about how we've made so much progress over the last handful of years. And the reason why we've made progress is because we are connecting and influencing the business. That's why we're making progress. Not because we're going back to a silo of an IT problem, because we're connecting and influencing the business. Yes. You can't unwind that now. Please don't.
No, please don't. It's taken us, oh my gosh, I've been doing this since 96, right? So, I mean, it's taken us a good 20 plus years, Jason, to get to this point. Yeah. Like, we don't want to go back. No. Yeah.
Absolutely not.
I brought this article in here. Hurricanes preparedness help us in ransomware, and the reason I brought this in, I've shared this story before on the podcast. Right, I started in nuclear power. I spent about 7.5 years in nuclear power, and when I left nuclear power, before I got into cybersecurity, I spent 6 months doing oil and gas. And my first project in that oil and gas job was to build the disaster recovery plan in case a hurricane came up the Gulf of Mexico and hit the refinery that I was working at. And I remember when Katrina hit, and this thought ran through my head, like, well, I built the plan. I wonder if that's the plan they're executing. And since these plans don't change very often, I'm pretty sure that's the plan they executed. And so what I thought was so interesting about this is things like hurricane preparedness are not much different than ransomware preparedness. And
I love this article.
And it starts with having a plan. Like, you've got to have a plan.
You know what? You want to know why I love this article? And I may have mentioned this before. I started in the public sector before I got into the consulting side, right? I started in government, public safety, public sector, and I've taken those FEMA ICS 200 courses. And let me tell you, that helped me so much in being able to do incident response planning, being able to help with business continuity planning. That foundation alone of taking FEMA's best practice when there's a natural disaster and being able to execute against that, helping with situations like business continuity and disaster recovery, incident response, priceless. I brought that into the consulting world and helped that build best practice for our customers, taking FEMA best practices and translating that to those different items. I love this article. Absolutely love it.
That's been the tabletop stuff, right? Like this is
Tabletop
tabletop 101 before tabletops were cool and a word with inside of security. This is why people that had done a lot of that were able to get the scenario based out there, work very well. And this is why I think they were very heavy-handed against pen testing, because they could see tabletops as being a much more useful exercise. And honestly, if we had started with Purple Team tabletops and evolved to the pen test in the exact opposite way, I think we'd be much further progressed in our security journey. But I love it.
So many of us in business continuity, disaster recovery, incident response always talk about exercise your plan to build muscle memory. That didn't come out of technology. That came out of disasters. Like that came out of FEMA. That's where this all came from.
And the other thing this does, it forces you to understand what's critical, that you have to get back online fast, right? We were talking about where's your data, what's critical, where's the impact. By documenting a plan, it forces you, because I remember when we were building the plan for the refinery, the most important thing was the ability to order parts to get the plant back online. It wasn't necessarily the IT systems. It wasn't necessarily certain other systems. It was, can I get procurement back up so I can order parts to replace anything that's been broken in the plant to get the plant back online, because it was all about the plant running. Because if you weren't refining crude, you weren't making money, right? But it forced you to identify those critical systems that you had to get back online quickly, and then everything else could flow behind it.
I'm telling you, if you have an opportunity, as a cybersecurity leader, to go take some of those FEMA courses, just the foundational ones, they will help you so much. There's ICS 100, there's ICS 200. Like, go take the first three, right? And you start learning how that structure works and how to build an incident command team and how to really respond to these type of incidents. I mean, it just creates such a well-designed structure, and it also helps you build a diverse team across your entire business. Because part of building your incident response or incident command team is making sure you have the right resources from all around the organization. Who owns the financials and who can pay the bills when you need them in a disaster? Who's your communication arm, right? Those are all of those foundational things when you're building out that ICT, that incident command team. Take them. They're easy. They're really quick courses, but they're well worth it.
Awesome. This next article, now that I pulled this one up, I got to go find the other three, because now I'm intrigued. So Harvard Business Review is doing a series on the 4 business ideas that change the world. This one is on emotional intelligence. And it's a podcast. It's also transcribed, so you can listen to it or you can read the transcription. And what I thought was interesting is I remember in the early part of my career this transition, because I started in about 88. Right, 88, 89 in the workforce. And it talks about prior to the 90s, how emotion was not part of the job. They thought it got in the way. And it was in the 90s, there was some research done around, emotion and emotional impact and empathy and other things. And so this transition started in the early 90s into the mid 90s. So this podcast goes in and talks about some of the history of this concept of emotional intelligence and some of the work that was done. It's intriguing because I remember the shift. I remember the shifts in training programs. I remember the shift in the hiring components. Like, I remember living parts of this. And it's some good history to really think about how emotion does, how understanding the emotion of your employees fits into kind of the practices that we have today. It's just a really interesting podcast to listen to. because there's so much history and it ties into kind of the transition I remember making in my career.
Yeah, and I mean, at this point, I consider a critical tool in your toolbox to be a leader.
Oh yeah.
You know, learning how to master, being able to work with your employees and having that, you know, they call it an emotional quotient, right? Having that insight to know when something's bothering an employee, when they're burning out. You know, it's funny. I've tried so hard to really sharpen that tool in my toolbox because people's feelings matter, right? Mm-hmm. The most important asset in our organization is our people. And if you're not taking care of them emotionally, right, financially, all those ways that matter, they're not going to be all in. And you want your employees to be all in, right? Working for the mission, working for the cause. And I've tried so hard to sharpen that to the point where I've been on meetings like this, right? Where you're on a video meeting, like a podcast, and I can pick out a nuance in someone's eyebrow, mm-hmm. and we'll get off, and I will ping them and say, "Is everything okay?"
Yeah. And
they'll be like, "How do you do that?" And it's been a running joke where it's like the Jason crystal ball, but it's picking up on subtleties, mm-hmm. knowing when someone's not okay, and doing something about it, saying something, showing you care, having that empathy, right? It's such an important tool in the toolbox because you don't know what's going on at home. You don't know what's going on in people's personal lives. You're there as a leader to make sure they're okay as a human being. Mm-hmm. Not just an employee, not just a number.
That's the only way you can actually scale and effectively scale and maintain that retention, right? Is having the good leaders in places in these small cells, because otherwise you get too big, you get corporate, you end up as a number, and then people don't feel taken care of, they don't care. That's how you end up with insider threat or loyalty or retention issues. All of those things play into that. So having those effective and trained leaders in the emotional intelligence makes all the difference for even large organizations.
It really does. And you want to know what? Even if you're a large organization, lead by example. Train your leaders to be leaders. Train your leaders to be able to have that emotional intelligence, to be able to pick up on things, and then it'll go downstream, right? Mm-hmm. So it will snowball downstream, and you'll have a great culture.
And the more you do that, the more people will start to bring up, like, I'm worried about Susie. I'm worried about Tom. Like, and that's good. Like, that's what you want. That's the dialogue you want to happen, Jason, because you want to identify those early. If you don't see it, but an employee sees it and brings it up, you can address it right away, and you can make a positive impact, right? But if it's not taught down, then you're never going to see all the levels, and that's never going to get bubbled up in the organization.
That's it, 100%. So that's, build a culture of emotional intelligence.
Yes. All right. I love this article. Was fun. Cybersecurity career mistakes. I've probably made a couple of these. So I'm going through the list going, yep, I've done that one. Yep, I've done that one. There's some really interesting ones in here. I don't know if you guys have one that you want to start with. There's a couple I wanted to point out, but I'll let you guys go first.
The one that stood out for me, and honestly, I've tried to use this my entire career, waiting for someone to promote you. Leadership is not a title. It's not a title. Be a leader. Plain and simple, right? No matter where you are in the org chart, no matter what your title is, be a leader, and I tell you, and I promise you, you will be recognized. Eventually, you'll have those titles. Eventually, you'll have those things. Just be a leader.
And if you're not, keep leading in your position until it is time to move on. That may actually be something
100%.
The big one for me was number 3, not to take care of your network. We have a very small network in cybersecurity. Like, I have always provided advice to anybody who's ever asked for it. I've always made sure I was there for my network because my network has been there for me when I needed it. There are times in your career where you're going to lose a job, it's going to be during a tough time, and you're going to need help. And when you have your network engaged and you can work with, trust me, they will pull you out of some of those situations, and my network has done that, and I've always made sure I've given back into that network. I'll have students ping me like, hey, can we connect? I'd love to get some advice. I've hopped on calls with kids graduating out of cyber programs to give them advice. I don't even know these people. I'll do it. Why? Because it's a benefit to our industry. And so I've always made sure I took care of that network.
And that is such a good point that you brought up, because in my head, I was going to say, not just take care of your current network, take care of your future network. Mm-hmm. I've told you before that I'm on career and technical, for K-12 evaluation boards. I'm on, Rhode Island Department of Education advisory boards. I help Girl Scouts get their cybersecurity badges. That's your future network, right? That's your future network. You bring in interns. So make sure you're building a future network as well.
Absolutely.
So it's existing and future.
Network up, and don't be scared of networking up, and network down. Those both play out long term.
100%.
Don't give a lot, because it doesn't always reciprocate, and sometimes it's often a decade. I can't tell you how many times it's been 10 plus years, and that one connection, that one reach out, that one small gesture, email, 10 years later paid dividends beyond like anything you could imagine, and that is just because you're paying that forward and not expecting something.
That's the key, right? Don't, do it because you love it. Do it because you're passionate about it. I believe in karma. Good things come to people who do good things, right? Just don't have expectations going into it. Just do it because you're passionate about it. And karma, I'm telling you, karma will come back and it'll be great.
It will. There's a couple other ones in here. I don't agree as much with number 7, not getting professional certifications. Now, I have my CISSP, my Certified Information System Security Professional. I got that a long time ago in 2002. I've kept it up. But I didn't go after a lot of other professional certifications. I didn't think it was important for me. So number 7 to me is not as important.
I think number 7 should be adjusted, Matt. Just don't stop learning.
Yeah.
How about that? Let's boil it down to what this really probably means. Don't stop learning. Don't stop getting educated. Don't stop wanting to dive in and being excited about learning.
Yep. And then number 1, going against the flow. I make this mistake all the time because there are some flows that I don't think are good for us. And sometimes I want to disrupt those flows. And so I have in my career more than once gone against the flow. And it was okay for me, so I don't consider it a mistake.
No, I agree.
Timing and tact also matter when you're going against the flow.
True.
Good point.
Always true. Always true. My wife would be like, no, you don't work at that company anymore. Yeah, but I'm better off for it, because at some point you got to think about the value and principles of yourself also in this. And, sometimes you get wrapped around the axle, you go with the flow, even though it might not be the right one, and people kind of go along for the ride. Sometimes I don't. And so mistake number 1 to me it has not been that big a mistake in my career.
What I will say is there's absolutely nothing wrong, and you're probably viewed upon at a higher level if you, I'll call it, challenge the process, right? There's nothing wrong with challenging the process at all. At the end of the day, the organization may say, you want to know what? We're still going down this path. Great. But at least they know you had the intellectual curiosity to challenge it, and challenge it for a reason.
Yeah.
It may be operational efficiencies that you're trying to achieve, and say, you want to know what? It's not worth it. We have to gain efficiencies here. We're expending too much money. There's too much risk. There's nothing wrong with challenging the process. And to be honest with you, it's the nature of what we do. We challenge the process. That's why we are who we are.
Right.
And your worldview and your mission actually may change as you mature and develop. And if you end up outpacing and outmaturing certain companies, and your business aptitude or acuity is past what they're capable of, then you do have to challenge and try and offer the chance for them to improve and change, but also realize that your views will change and you will mature. And often that pace at which you do it will be faster than whatever business you're in. And that's where you end up making good decisions and challenging that and ending up out somewhere else.
Absolutely. So this last article, 13 cybersecurity horror stories. I'm not going to cover all these. I think there's some great reads if anybody wants to look at them. It was Halloween, so I had to throw them in here. But we don't have a lot of time to cover them. Were there any stories in here that any of you wanted to cover before we call it a day?
No, I think it's a good read. I mean, I just say, take the stories, read them, take them in, and, it was just a good read, a good, easy read.
It's a good, easy read. Gentlemen, thank you so much for joining me today. Thank you, everyone, for joining us. Happy Halloween. We'll see you next week on Business Security Weekly.